Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad with Capitalism Hits Home. Today I want to talk about abortion, which is always hotly contested when women are trying to survive and the right wing is trying to control women's bodies. Abortion has always been with us, so it's not like a recent invention. Linda Gordon, in her book, The Social History of Birth Control, talks about how in biblical times, women used a peach pit as an intrauterine device to prevent pregnancy, and nobody thought too much about it. My grandmother and my husband's grandmother both had multiple abortions. They'd go to the midwife, have an abortion. They wouldn't advertise it, but it wasn't a big national issue either. It comes up as an issue around the control of women, which is part of a right-wing agenda. Now, why should the right wing care? Well, one of the things that a right wing needs to control a population that might unite is to divide them as much as possible and to give white males supremacy. So the division of white men from women and from minorities serves the upper classes and prevents the unity of the working class, of the mass of people who do the work in the society. And one way they divide men from women is to emphasize the differences between men and women and to make men ascendant over women. They do that by putting laws passed overwhelmingly by male legislators against women and to control women's bodies. It was very clear in the recent victory of abortion rights in Argentina, where the Catholic Church allied with the upper classes and the fascistic parties to try to fight abortion rights, whereas the indigenous movement, the labor unions, the left, and progressive women united and passed abortion rights in a very Catholic country for the first time. But the alliances were very clear. Also, if you want women to be controlled, you need to try to get them to think of themselves and be treated as breeders for men, and that their usefulness in society is as breeders instead of as workers, partners, equal human beings in every respect. You consign them to their biology. And that is what's happening today as the right wing gains force in the United States. It has two expressions in trying to control women's reproduction. One is to push women into childbirth, which I should say that abortion rights should be guaranteed by the Constitution, because a forced pregnancy is a cruel and unusual punishment, and the Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishments. Many more women die in childbirth than from an abortion. And the pain of childbirth is far greater than the pain of an abortion. And the complications in childbirth are far more destructive than any complications in abortion, which is a simple procedure, and now with the 2 pills, perfectly safe. And so, why should people inflict a cruel and unusual punishment? Well, for a lot of reasons. One is to divide the working class. And we should understand that abortion is also a class issue. Rich women have always been able to get their personal physicians to arrange an abortion for them. It's poor women and middle-class women who don't have that kind of money and don't have an expensive private physician in whose office you can perform an abortion. Those women are the ones denied an abortion. Women who are the majority of American women who go to a place like Planned Parenthood, which is safe and public and low cost. And so we're talking about real class divisions here. The original women's movement, of which I am a proud founder of the second wave feminist movement, had two prongs to our abortion rights our abortion rights movement. One was the ability to have a free abortion, to have that right, like I should say every other Western industrialized wealthy country has, except the United States. And the other is to stop forced sterilizations, because control of women's bodies has also been a weapon to stop undesirable people, i.e. poor people, or minority people from having children. And that may sound terrible and only from the old days, but that's not true. Just this year, in a privately owned ICE detention center in Irving County Detention Center in Georgia, they were forcibly sterilizing the ICE members who were women there and altering their reproduction so that they could not have children, because the right wing doesn't want minorities and immigrants who are not desirable, i.e. not Norwegian. Of course, the people of Norway know better than to immigrate here, but to stop women from being able to have children. They don't want any more children who aren't wealthy in this society, and they want to control the women who are here and who are American, and push more white Americans to have unwanted children, which is, of course, not only terrible for women, because pregnancy that you don't want is a cruel and unusual punishment, but a terrible curse on children. It's hard enough to be a child, so powerless, but to be an unwanted child is a terrible punishment for children that should also be banned by the Constitution. Way back in the early part of our country, there were forced sterilizations of Native Americans who somehow got caught up in our medical system or in our criminal system, and of Black people and brown people, so that controlling women's reproductive capacities go both ways, forbidding abortion for white, middle class, and poor people, and sterilizing poor Black and brown people. And that still goes on in the case in Irving, Georgia, which was only revealed by a very courageous woman, Dawn Wooten, who blew the whistle on this, and because of that is blacklisted in her hometown in Georgia and can't work as a nurse, as she worked in the ICE detention center as a nurse and was privy to all these terrible things and had the courage to speak up about it as a whistleblower, and who is being punished by it. So that abortion is also a class issue, but the main point of abortion prohibitions is to force women into unwanted childbirth that takes their time away from the workforce and that makes them dependent on whoever the male provider is. And this is happening in the context of America now, as women are more and more empowered, partly because we've had to work to make up for capitalists outsourcing male jobs, particularly well-paid union jobs, and changing this country from a manufacturing center to a service economy with much lower pay. And so women have been forced into work, and once forced into work, have enjoyed the power that independent income gives us. Because in the old family, available really only to white people, because minority men never got a family wage. In the old system, women were like feudal serfs. They worked and created use values, cleanliness, cooked food, sexual satisfaction, child rearing, social connection of a man with his relatives and friends and his children, emotional services of understanding, in exchange for a place to live and work. And like the feudal serf who had a certain share of the crop that he, she, or they created so that they could survive, women were able to also eat, live in a neat place, have their children benefited, get something out of the emotional services from friends, or at least if not from their husbands. And for service, their service was more like what you'd call that of a feudal serf, who also created use value things, gave a share to the lord of the manor, and was allowed to survive on the share remaining. As that whole economy of the household has broken down, women are part of the labor force and have some independence and may not want a feudal serf job at home while they have a job in the capitalist economy outside of work. However, by keeping women pregnant, you force them home. You force their dependency on men. And you force them in a subordinate position. Because if you're looking after many children, you don't have much time or energy for political activism or career advancement. So that it is a directly anti-female thrust. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in their work said you can tell the advancement of a civilization and of a nation by the way they treat women. And as our country goes backward in time, and as our people die younger and younger, and as fewer and fewer people have any children because they don't believe in the future, and as we lose our wars and go backwards, the right wing is trying to assert male supremacy and white male supremacy, and to divide the mass of workers from each other so that we don't all together demand a more just and economically possible future together. And so abortion is an element of class control through controlling women's bodies. And it has always been so. There have always been abortions. It's just that poor women have had to try to abort themselves or go to on unsafe conditions, because having an unwanted child, particularly with someone who is intolerable to live with, is a cruel and unusual punishment. What happens when you ban abortions is women still try to abort unwanted children. They just are much more likely to bleed to death and die, and much less likely to be healthy and be able to parent if they want to and be available for a wanted child. And so this assault on women is part of a right-wing thrust, because abortion has always been here. It will be here. And the way you treat it is a real testimony to the question of whether you want to inflict a cruel and unusual punishment on the majority of the people, and women are a slight majority in the United States, or whether you're going to give women and men the honor to decide if they want a child together, and women most of all, because it's women's bodies that go through a pregnancy, and it's women who are held legally responsible for children. Men are supposed to pay, even when they're not around, but 2/5 of them pay nothing after 5 years, and so that they don't necessarily pay economically or see their children. It's women who are left with the burden, and it's women who therefore have the right to decide here. We're not in a society that takes care of its children or its women. We don't even give what every other nation, there's 4 nations in the world that don't give maternity or paternity leaves. They're the United States, Swaziland, Somalia, and Papua New Guinea. Wow, that's the company we're in. Very poor and backward countries and the United States. Because abortion rights are part of recognizing the humanity of women and not trying to create a hierarchy that forces women into a cruel and unusual punishment. So that we need to look at the thrust to take away the right to an abortion in the United States as just that, a right-wing attempt to divide the mass of workers, to create a male hierarchy, and to consign millions of children to lives of abuse. And so that's what we're dealing with right now in the United States. And taking away abortion rights is a token of our backwardness. Marx and Engels were right. You can tell the advancement of a civilization or a society by the way that society treats women. Thank you. This podcast is brought to you, as I said, by Democracy at Work. We encourage you to be a Patreon member. And I want to especially thank Democracy at Work for making this possible. Goodbye from Capitalism Hits Home and Dr. Harriet Fraad.